The sky above Helios Prime was not a sky anymore. It was a bruise, stained with the sickly green of chemical fires, and the harsh white flashes of orbital plasma hitting the planetary shields. The shields were failing. Everyone in the Coalition bunker knew it. The deep, shuddering thump that rolled through the reinforced ground every few seconds was proof. Another shield generator, Gone. Commander Calyx of the Vryn, clicked its mandibles in a gesture of final resignation. On the tactical hologram, the glowing red tide of the Cathar was erasing the last blue defensive positions. The Vryn fought with disciplined, unyielding lines. They died in disciplined, unyielding lines. It was their way. To the Vryn, this was an honorable, if inevitable, end. Next to him, high-perched Cithara of the Silphus ruffled her silver feathers, a sign of deep distress. Her people struck from the air, and from afar with elegant energy lances. Now their wings were singed, their perches overrun. They had no more room to retreat. The Cathar did not take prisoners. They harvested. The stories of what happened in the Cathar biovats were the stuff of galactic nightmares. That is why they called them demons. It was not just their appearance chitinous, multi-limbed, mouths full of grinding plates, but their actions. The final perimeter is compromised, Calyx stated, his voice a dry rustle. We have perhaps 17 of your minutes before they breach this chamber. Cithara let out a soft, mournful trill. Then we shall make our final stand here. Our songs will end with the clash of blades. It is acceptable. There was no hope. No reinforcements were coming. The Galactic Coalition had stretched its forces thin across 100 fronts. Helios Prime was a sacrificial pawn, a delay tactic. They were the delay. Suddenly, a new alert chirped on the sensor officer's console. A single ship had just dropped out of warp at the edge of the system. It was small, blocky, and ugly by Coalition standards. Its energy signature was primitive, relying on crude matter-antimatter reactions. Its identification tag flashed, UN's Vanguard, Terran Sovereignty. A human ship. A brief, painful flicker of something. Not hope, but pity fluttered in Cithara's heart. The humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, quiet, observant. Their technology was decades behind. Their offer to send a small contingency force had been seen as a polite, almost childish formality. That they had actually come to this certain death was tragically noble. Open a channel, Cithara said softly. We must thank them for their gesture and tell them to flee, to save themselves. There is no point in their species joining our extinction today. On the bridge of the Vanguard, the atmosphere was the opposite of the doomed bunker. It was quiet, cool, and focused. The lights were low, the only sounds the soft beeps of systems and the hum of the life support. Captain Lee Tae-Soo stood before the main view screen, his hands clasped behind his back. He wore a simple black uniform, no medals, no adornments. His face was calm, like still water. Sergeant Park Ji-Hyun stood at his right shoulder, her eyes scanning the torrent of data flowing on a side console. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe knot. She did not look at the horrific images of the ground battle. She looked at maps, density readings, and energy dispersion patterns. Primary target zones are saturated, she said, her voice low and even. Cathar Command Cluster is located here, in the geothermal fissure. Their coordination is hive-linked, but shows a 5% latency in the western swarm. Lee Tae-Soo gave a single slight nod. An incoming transmission request appeared. It was the Cathar command frequency, not the Coalition's. Lee's eyebrow lifted, just a millimeter. Put it through. The screen flickered, and the image of Archon Valineth filled it. The creature was massive, even over the link. Its chitin was a polished, oily black, etched with scars of 1,000 battles. 4 amber eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, glowed with cold intelligence and vast amusement. Its voice, when it came, was a vibration that seemed to come from the bones of the ship itself. "Little ship," Valinith rasped, the grinding plates of its mouth moving. "You have come to witness. Or to bring a snack? Your species data is bland, soft. You will barely be a footnote in our consumption logs." On the Vanguard, the crew did not flinch. Park Ji-hyen's lip curled slightly, not in fear, but in distaste, as if smelling something foul. Li Tae-su looked directly into the Archon's eyes. "Kai-Thar forces. You are operating in a zone now under Terran sovereignty protection. You will disengage from the Coalition forces and withdraw from the Helios Prime system immediately." There was a moment of stunned silence, both on the Cathar ship and in the Coalition bunker, where they were listening in. Then Archon Valinith let out a sound, a guttural, rumbling roar that was its version of laughter. "You order us? You, a hairless ape in a metal tin? We are the end of cycles. We are the great devourer. We do not disengage. We consume." Li's expression did not change. "Your refusal is noted. This is your only warning." He made a small, cutting motion with his hand. The communication line went dead, leaving the view screen showing the planet below. In the bunker, Sithara heart sank. The humans were not just naive, they were insane. They had provoked the Archon. Now their deaths would be especially cruel. On the Vanguard, Li turned from the screen. "Sergeant Park, sir, the Coalition's defeat is tactical. Their strategy is passive defense. It will always fail against an enemy like this." He walked to a different console, where a three-dimensional map of the battlefield glowed. "We will not reinforce a failing line. We will cut the arm off at the shoulder. Deploy the 1st Special Operations Group. Cody name, Wrath. Full rules of engagement. Authorization, Omega." Park Ji-hyen's eyes hardened, a flicker of intense focus passing through them. "Yes, sir." She turned and moved swiftly towards the deployment bay, her voice snapping over the ship-wide comms. "All Wrath elements. Combat drop in 90 seconds. Hell jump protocol. Load for Hivebreaker operations." In the crew bay, the soldiers moved with a quiet, lethal efficiency. There were no loud battle cries, no prayers. There was the click of seals, the thud of magazines being seated, the low whine of armor systems powering up. Corporal Kim Min-ji checked her medkit for the 3rd time. It was not like a Coalition medkit. Alongside biogel and bone knitters, it held syringes of neurotoxin and canisters of acidic coagulant. Her face, usually kind, was set in a mask of serene concentration. Sergeant Choi Hyun-woo hummed a tuneless song as he assembled a large, blocky weapon from parts in his locker. It was not an elegant energy projector. It was a launcher for physical munitions. He slid a drum magazine into it, the rounds inside labeled with simple, terrible words: Fletchet, Thurobaric, Void Crack. Dr. Kwon Soo-bin, the xenobiologist, stood to the side, her datapad trembling in her hands. She was to observe and record. "Sergeant Choi," she asked, her voice thin, "those rounds? Void crack? That's theoretical. It disrupts molecular bonds at a localized level. The Geneva Conventions." Choi Hyun-woo glanced at her, his eyes calm. "Dr. Kwon," he said, his voice soft, "those demons down there? They never signed the conventions." He sealed his helmet with a hiss. Park Ji-hyen strode to the front of the bay. "Listen up." Her voice was crisp in their helmet coms. "Forget what you've seen in the Coalition briefs. The Cathar are not demons. They are animals. Clever, vicious animals. And we are the butcher's hook. We do not hold the line. We break theirs. We do not defend positions. We destroy their ability to attack. Shock and awe is for the enemy's politicians. What we do is simpler. We hurt them. We hurt them so badly, so deeply, that the very idea of facing us again makes their hive mind scream. Drop in 10. In the bunker, Calyx watched the red tide reach the outer walls. He picked up his plasma pike. This was the end. On the Vanguard, Lee Tae-soo watched the drop pods, 20 black teardrops, fire from his ship's belly. They did not streak toward the besieged coalition fortress. They shot like bullets on a steep, burning trajectory past it, arcing over the front lines, deep into the churning, unprotected heart of the Cathar swarm. Archon Valaneth, watching from orbit, saw them too. It felt another rumble of amusement. The humans were not even trying to save their allies. They were dropping their soldiers directly into the densest part of his swarm. A suicide drop. How utterly pathetic. Let them land, he grumbled to his sub-commanders. Crush them before they even exit their pods. Let the coalition watch their would-be saviors become paste. The pods pierced the smoky atmosphere, their trails like black scars on the bruised sky. They slammed into the ground, not with gentle repulsor landings, but with earth-shattering kinetic impacts, right in the middle of a major Cathar staging ground. For a moment, there was silence. Then the hatches blew off. Not opening, but explosively launched outward, scything through the first wave of approaching Cathar warriors like metallic guillotines. From the smoke and dust, dark figures emerged. They did not form a defensive circle. They did not dig in. They simply started walking, weapons raised, and began to fire. The sound was not the high-pitched whine of blasters. It was the deafening, physical thump of projectile weapons. The ripping roar of high-velocity flechettes. The crump of grenades that seemed to suck the air in before they exploded. The Cathar, expecting terror, hesitation, a last stand, were met with something else entirely. A cold, methodical, and immediate counter-invasion. The war for Helios Prim. The sound was the first thing that changed. For days, the air over the battlefield had been a symphony of high-pitched Cathar shrieks, the sizzle of plasma, and the crumbling of masonry. Now, a new sound arrived. It was lower, physical, a deep, rhythmic thump-thump-thump that vibrated in the chest, followed by the wet, tearing noise of high-velocity metal meeting chitin. From the crumbling walls of Fortress Aegis, Commander Calyx of the Vryn watched the landing zone through a magnoscope. He expected to see the brief, bright flash of human lives being extinguished. Instead, he saw a storm of metal and fire erupting inside the Cathar swarm. The human drop pods had become instant fortresses, their hatches used as shields, their landing struts anchoring firing lines. But the humans were not staying put. A group of 5 dark figures moved away from their pod. They walked, not ran, into a hail of Cathar bioplasma. The green bolts sizzled through the air. The humans did not dodge. Their black armor absorbed the hits, glowing hot in spots, but not buckling. One soldier, larger than the others, stopped. He hefted a heavy, blocky weapon. Sergeant Choi Hyun-woo took a half-second to aim and fired a single round. It was not an explosive. It flew silently and struck the ground 20 meters ahead, in the middle of a cluster of charging Cathar. There was a brilliant blue flash, and then a sphere of absolute darkness. A void appeared for a fraction of a second. When it vanished, the Cathar within that sphere were gone. Not disintegrated, but unmade, leaving a perfectly smooth, glassy crater. The Cathar behind them stumbled, their charge broken by the sudden, impossible hole in reality and their comrades. Void weapon. Calyx hissed, his mandibles slack with horror. Such technology was forbidden, unstable. The humans used it as simple area denial. The humans kept walking. They reached a narrow causeway between two rock formations, a perfect funnel. Calyx waited for them to set up a defensive position. Instead, the female soldier, Sergeant Park Ji-hyun, pointed to the top of the rock formations. The large soldier, Choi, nodded. He pulled 2 discs from his belt, slapped them against the stone bases on either side of the causeway, and moved back. A soft crump and the rock faces sheared off, collapsing into the funnel, burying a dozen Cathar scouts in an instant. They hadn't killed the enemy in the funnel. They had removed the funnel itself. Their path was now clear. It was brutal, efficient terraforming. Back at the main human pod, the medic was at work. Corporal Kim Min-ji had found a wounded Sylphus warrior, its wing sheared off by a bioblade. The avian creature was trilling in pain and fear. Kim knelt beside it, her movements swift but gentle. She sprayed a coagulant on the stump, the Sylphus flinching. "She, little bird." "Almost done," Kim murmured, her voice filtered through her helmet, but surprisingly soft. As she applied a sealant bandage with one hand, a Cathar lurcher, a low, fast scout, scrambled over the rubble toward her. Kim didn't look up. Her other hand brought up a heavy pistol. She fired 3 times over her shoulder. The shots were not aimed at the creature's center mass. The first shattered a forward knee joint. The second exploded a sensory horn on its head. The third punched through its primary vocal sac. The lurcher went down, screeching silently, thrashing blindly. It was not dead. It was helpless. Kim finished securing the Sylphus's bandage, patted its shoulder, and then stood. She walked calmly to the flailing lurcher, aimed her pistol down, and fired a single round into its brainstem. Then she returned to check on her patient dot. It was the cold pragmatism of it that froze Calyx's blood. The coalition fought to kill. The humans fought to dismantle, to remove functionality. Death was often a side effect, sometimes a mercy delivered afterwards. He watched the point team, led by Park and Captain Lee Tae-soo, approach a Cathar spitter nest. The nests were organic structures that launched volleys of corrosive bile. A coalition assault would involve heavy suppressive fire and a slow advance. The humans stopped 100 meters out. Park lifted a tube to her shoulder. There was a soft puff. The projectile flew in a high arc. It was not an explosive. It burst above the nest, releasing a cloud of sparkling silver dust. The dust settled over the nest and the Cathar around it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the spitter nest began to twitch and seize. The Cathar warriors guarding it started to scratch frantically at their own chitin. The silver dust was nanofilaments, short-circuiting bioelectrical signals and causing uncontrollable, agonizing neural feedback. The nest stopped firing. The guards were too busy clawing at themselves to fight. The human team simply walked past the convulsing mound, ignoring it. They did not waste ammunition on the disabled. They let the enemy's own ruined biology finish the job. Up in orbit, Dr. Kwon Soo-bin watched the sensor feeds and the helmet cam footage, her stomach churning. She saw Private Kim Min-ji's actions. She wounded it intentionally to make an example? To cause pain? On the ground, Choi Hyun-woo's calm voice came over the comms to the doctor. "Negative, Doc. A wounded enemy requires 2 others to carry it. A dead enemy is just a body. A helpless enemy, screaming and thrashing, breaks the morale of the ones next to it. You fight the body, we fight the mind. Even a hive mind." Archon Valineth felt the first tremors of discord. It was not pain. It was confusion. Reports flooded the hive link from the western swarm. Not reports of fierce resistance, but of strange silence, of tools that stopped working, of ground that fell away, of allies who suddenly started tearing themselves apart. The humans were not an army. They were a systemic infection. Captain Lee's team reached their first major objective, a Caithar synaptic relay, a pulsing, fleshy node that boosted the hive mind signals in the local area. It was protected by a full cadre of warriors. Lee didn't order an assault. He spoke 2 words. Sonic profile, Thera. One of his soldiers pulled a thick cylinder from his pack and slammed it into the ground. A sound began. It was not loud at first. It was a deep, discordant hum, like the world's worst musical note played on a broken instrument. It vibrated through the rock, through the air, through the Caithar's very carapaces. The warriors around the relay shuddered. Their movements became uncoordinated. The relay itself pulsed in distress, its rhythmic beat faltering. The sonic pulse was tuned to the resonant frequency of Caithar communication chitin. It was like permanent, screaming feedback in their minds. The humans walked into the disoriented mass. They did not use bullets. They used monomolecular blades and powered gauntlets. Park Ji-hyun moved like water, flowing past a slashing blade, her own knife finding the soft joint between a warrior's arm and body. She severed the tendon, and the limb went limp. She kicked the creature into its companion. Lee Tae-soo moved with crushing efficiency, his powered fist shattering leg segments, dropping enemies to the ground where they were left, immobilized. They carved a path to the relay, not by killing everyone, but by making everyone in their way incapable of fighting. They reached the twitching, fleshy node. Choi Hyun-woo placed a small adhesive charge on it. They walked away. The charge detonated with a soft, contained pop, turning the critical relay into inert slurry. The effect was immediate. In the bunker, Calyx saw a whole section of the advancing red tide on his hologram stop. The Caithar in that sector milled about, erectionless, easy targets for the Coalition's remaining artillery. For the first time in days, a patch of the map was not bleeding red. High-perched Sathara landed beside Calyx, her good wing folded. "What are they?" she trilled, her voice full of awe and a new, deeper fear. "They are not soldiers. They are surgeons, butchers of an army." Calyx watched as the small, 5-human team continued their walk deeper into enemy territory, leaving a trail of broken, screaming, and bewildered Caithar in their wake. The demons were not being slain. They were being taken apart, piece by piece, their own terrifying power turned into a liability. The message was becoming clear. The humans were not here to save Helios Prime. They were here to send a message to the Caithar, and they were using the Caithar's own bodies to write it. The sound of galactic warfare had changed forever. Silence. It was the most shocking thing. After the thunder of human weapons, after the screams of the Caithar and the discordant hum of their sonic devices, a heavy quiet had settled over the humans' advance. They were deep in the scarred land now, a place where the Caithar hive had fully taken root. The ground was no longer rock and soil, but a tough, veined membrane. The air smelled of ammonia and spoiled meat. Captain Lee Tae-soo held up a closed fist. The 5 dark figures behind him froze instantly, becoming part of the shadowed landscape. Sergeant Park Ji-hyun crouched low, her head tilted. She wasn't listening with her ears. She was watching the subtle vibrations in the fleshy ground. A pulse, like a slow heartbeat, traveled through the membrane from the east. "Patrol," she whispered over the team's secure channel. 5 medium heavies. 30 meters, closing on intercept. Lee nodded. He pointed to the base of a large, twisted rock spire that looked partly melted. Sergeant Choi Hyun-woo moved without a word. He placed 2 small, dough-like charges on the rock at precise points. He then took a thin wire from his pack and ran it back to their position. They all moved back, crouching behind a ridge of hardened biomechanical waste. The Caithar patrol rounded the spire. They were large, their chitin thick, carrying heavy biocannons that oozed corrosive fluid. They moved with confident purpose, their sensory horns twitching, searching for the elusive humans whose trail had gone cold. Choi looked at Lee. Lee gave a single nod. Choi pressed a button on the small detonator in his hand. There was no big explosion, just two sharp, precise cracks. The charges did not blow the rock apart. They sheared it. With a groan, the entire top third of the rock spire snapped off its base and toppled directly onto the patrol. It was not an attack meant to kill. It was an environmental removal. Tons of rock crushed the Cathar into the soft ground, burying them completely. The sound was a deep, final crunch, then more silence. No fight, no warning. Just geology as a weapon. Path clear, Choi stated, his voice calm. They moved forward, stepping over the new pile of rubble. Dr. Kwon Soo Bin's voice, strained and thin, came over the combs from orbit. Captain, the energy readings from your target. They're spiking. The biosynaptic node is aware. It's directing more forces toward your last known location. We are not at our last known location, Doctor, Lee replied, his voice even. He looked at Park, the vents. She was already moving, leading them toward a cluster of large, pulsating tubes that rose from the ground like giant wormholes. These were nutrient conduits, pumping raw, processed biomass from the surface to the deeper hive. Hot, foul-smelling air blasted from their tops. The tubes were made of a cartilaginous material, tough but flexible. Kim Min-ji, the medic, approached one. From her pack, she didn't pull out a scanner. She pulled out a syringe gun loaded with a vial of milky liquid. Broad-spectrum prionic catalyst, she said, mostly to herself. She injected the entire vial into the flesh of the conduit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the tube began to convulse. A wave of stiff, crystallized corruption traveled up its length. The pulsing stopped. The flow of nutrients ceased. The conduit was now a dead, clogged pipe. It will spread, Kim said quietly, to the connected processing glands. A cascade failure. They were not just moving past the enemy's defenses. They were giving the hive a disease as they passed. The entrance to the deep tunnels was a gaping maw in the ground, lined with teeth-like protrusions. It was heavily guarded by a full squad of Cathar warriors, their weapons raised, watching the open approach. A direct assault would be costly and noisy. Lee studied the situation. He pointed to a series of smaller, blister-like structures on the ceiling of the cavern just above the tunnel entrance. Pressure sacks. For waste venting. Choi Hyun-woo nodded, understanding. He slung his heavy weapon and took out a rifle with a long, thin barrel. He loaded a single needle-like dart. He aimed not at the guards, but at the largest, most bloated sack high above them. He fired. The dart was silent. It pierced the sack. A hiss began. Then a jet of green, foul-smelling liquid sprayed from the tiny hole, showering down on the Cathar guards below. The liquid was not deadly. It was acidic waste. It sizzled on their chitin, not burning through, but smoking and stinking. It blinded their sensory horns. It filled the air with a choking, disorienting mist. The guards stumbled, clawing at their faces, their formation breaking into chaos. The humans did not fire a single shot at them. They simply put on their sealed helmet filters, walked through the billowing, acrid fog, past the choking, blinded demons, and stepped into the darkness of the descending tunnel. It was an insult, not an attack. The tunnel was alive. The walls glowed with a faint bioluminescence. They could feel the heartbeat of the hive here, a deep, rhythmic thrumming in the air and through the soles of their boots. Strange clicks and gurgles echoed in the distance. Park Ji-hyun took the lead. Her role changed. Here, the close, twisting quarters were her domain. She moved like a ghost, her dark armor blending with the shadows. Twice, Cathar skitterers, small, fast alert creatures, dropped from the ceiling. Both times, Park's arm moved in a blur. A small wrist-mounted blade snapped out. There was a wet snick, and the skitterers fell, their neural cords severed before they could scream in alarm. She didn't break stride. She would kneel, check the corpse for any bio-alarm pheromones, spray a neutralizing agent, and move on. She was a cleaner, wiping their passage from the hive's awareness. They descended for what felt like hours. The air grew hotter, thicker. The sense of being inside a living thing was overwhelming. Dr. Kwan's voice was a tiny, horrified whisper in their ears. "Your biosigns are spiking. The ambient bioelectrical field is interfering with my scans. You are deep, so deep." "We are on track," Lee said, his breathing still even. The target on his helmet display glowed steadily ahead. The heart of the local swarm. The biosynaptic node dot, they reached a final chamber before the main vault. It was a large, round room with a single organic bridge spanning a bottomless chasm. The chasm echoed with the sounds of rushing, viscous fluid far below. On the other side of the bridge was a sealed, muscular sphincter, the door to the node chamber. Guarding the bridge were 3 Cathar of a type they had not seen before. They were taller, sleeker. Their chitin was a darker, almost purple-black, and it seemed to drink the light. They held not biocannons, but long, whip-like blades made of hardened bone that gleamed with a sharp, hungry edge. These were the Shadow Song, the elite. The personal guard of the node dot, they stood perfectly still, blocking the way. Their sensory horns were focused, locked onto the humans the moment they entered the chamber. A direct, traditional fight here would be long, loud, and would certainly alert the entire hive. Lee Tae-Soo looked at the bridge. It was a thick, sinewy structure. He looked at the chasm. He looked at the Shadow Song. He made a series of quick hand signals. Park and Choi moved left and right, taking cover behind natural rock columns. Kim Min-ji prepped a different kind of syringe, her hands steady. Lee himself stepped into the open, in full view of the elite guards. The lead Shadow Song took a step forward, its blade rising. It let out a low, challenging chitter that vibrated in the chest. Lee raised his own weapon, but did not fire. He was buying time. Choi Hyan-woo, from his cover, took aim at the base of the organic bridge, where it met the chamber wall, not at the center. He fired his heavy weapon. The round was a high-temperature plasma cutter. It hit the bridge's anchor point and flared, burning through the dense flesh and tendon with a shriek of superheated steam. The entire bridge shuddered. The Shadow Song stumbled, their perfect stance broken. In that moment of distraction, Kim Min-ji leaned out and fired her syringe gun. The dart hit the floor in the middle of the 3 elites and burst, releasing a fast-acting, oily aerosol. It was a powerful synaptic inhibitor, designed to slow reaction times. To muddy the hive link, the lead Shadow Song shrieked in rage, the sound clearer now. Laced with something new, not just anger, but affront. This was not honorable combat. This was sabotage. The bridge groaned. Choi fired another plasma round into the opposite anchor. With a terrible, tearing sound, the sinews holding the bridge to the human side of the chasm gave way. The bridge did not fall. It swung down like a pendulum, slamming into the far wall of the chasm with a sickening wet slap. It was now a hanging, useless ramp leading into the abyss. The way forward was gone. The Shadow Song were still on the other side, separated by the gap. Hissing in fury, Lee Tae-Soo looked at them across the chasm. Then he turned. He pointed to the wall of their side of the chamber. Not to the door. There was no door. He pointed to the living wall itself. "Here, we dig." Choi Hyan-woo was already pulling a cylindrical charge from his pack. Not a breaching charge, a burrowing charge. It was designed to burn through soft material and seal the tunnel behind it. He placed it against the throbbing hive wall. Fire in the hole. The charge activated with a muffled hump and a searing flash of light. Where there was solid, living tissue, there was now a dark, smoking tunnel, just large enough for a person to crawl through. The smell of cooked meat filled the chamber. They had not fought the guards. They had ignored them. They had changed the battlefield and then left it, boring directly through the hive's flesh toward their target, leaving the proud E. The tunnel stank of burned meat and cooked chitin. The air was thick, hot, and hard to breathe. Captain Lee Tae-soo crawled out first, his weapon scanning the new space. He emerged not into another tunnel, but onto a narrow, fleshy ledge high up in a vast cavern. The sight below made even his steady breathing hitch for a second. This was the heart. The biosynaptic node dot the chamber was enormous, a cathedral of pulsating, living tissue. The walls were a lattice of glowing nerves and pulsing blood vessels, the size of tree trunks. In the center of the cavern, suspended by thick, cord-like tendons from the ceiling and floor, hung the node itself. It was a monstrous, beautiful, and terrifying thing. It looked like a giant brain made of dark amber and obsidian, veined with rivers of liquid light that throbbed in a slow, powerful rhythm. Thump, 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 thump. Each pulse sent a visible wave of energy through the cavern, making the very air shimmer. This was where the local swarm's will was focused. This was the mind they had come to kill. Below, the floor was not empty. It swarmed with Cathar, not just warriors, but workers, tenders, synaptic weavers, the vital, non-combatant core of the hive. And guarding the base of the node's central tendon were the remaining Shadow Song. They had not been fooled by the missing bridge for long. They had scrambled through interior passages and now stood, blades ready, forming a deadly ring around the node's base. They looked up, their amber eyes finding the humans on the ledge high above. A chorus of clicks and hisses echoed through the chamber, a sound of pure, undiluted hate. Dr. Kwon Subin's voice was a panicked rasp in their ears from orbit. Captain, the neural energy output is catastrophic. You cannot engage that many. The Shadow Song alone. Their biosignatures are off the scale. You must retreat. Lee ignored her. His eyes were fixed on the node. Sergeant Choi, primary payload. Target the major support tendon's upper connections. Sir, Choi Hyun-woo said. He was already assembling a launcher, this one longer and more complex. He loaded a single heavy canister from a sealed case. Sergeant Park, Corporal Kim, Guard Sergeant Choi. The Shadow Song will come. Stop them. Park Ji-hyun nodded, her face a mask of cool focus. She drew two long, heavy combat knives from her back, the edges humming to life with a low vibration. Kim Min-ji slung her rifle and drew her pistol, and a short, brutal-looking trench knife. They took positions on either side of Choi, who was kneeling, calculating the shot. The Shadow Song moved. They did not charge up the walls. 4 of them detached from the guard ring and simply began to climb the cavern wall with terrifying speed, their sharp limbs punching directly into the living rock and flesh. Lee Tae-soo looked at his team. Hellfire protocol. Now. Choi fired. The canister shot from his launcher with a soft thump. It flew true and struck the thick, rope-like tendon that anchored the top of the node to the ceiling. It did not explode. It burst open, releasing a cloud of glittering, icy blue particles. Where the particles touched the tendon, a horrific cracking sound echoed. The tendon flash froze, turning from flexible tissue to brittle crystal in an instant. The immense weight of the node did the rest. With a deafening snap, the frozen tendon shattered. The entire node lurched, swinging ponderously on its remaining lower anchors. The light within it flared wildly. Agony, not physical but psychic, ripped through the chamber. Every Cathar, from the smallest worker to the climbing shadow song, shrieked in unison, a sound of pure, shared mental trauma. The climbing elites faltered for a moment, their hive link flooded with the node's distress that it was the opening Park and Kim needed. The first shadow song reached the ledge. It was faster than anything they had fought. Its bone blade whistled through the air, aiming to decapitate Choi. Park Ji-hyun met it. She didn't block the blade. She sidestepped and slammed her vibrating knife into the creature's weapon arm joint. The humming edge met the black chitin. It did not cut cleanly. It ground, it shattered, it pulverized the joint into dust. The shadow song's arm went limp, the blade clattering to the ledge. It screeched, swinging its other limb. Park ducked under the blow and drove her second knife up through its lower jaw into its cranial case. The screeching stopped. She shoved the twitching body off the ledge. Kim Min-ji faced the second one. It was more cautious. It feinted with its whip blade. Kim didn't fall for it. She fired her pistol, not at its body, but at the wall next to its head. The round was a micro-flashbang. It detonated with a concussive bang and a blinding light right in the creature's primary sensory cluster. The shadow song recoiled, blinded and disoriented. Kim closed the distance, her trench knife finding the gap between its thoracic plates. She twisted, not to kill, but to sever a major neural ganglion. The elite warrior collapsed, paralyzed, its legs useless, its body writhing. Below, the remaining shadow song were enraged. They began a full assault, swarming up the walls like terrible insects. Choi, the lower anchors now. Lee ordered, firing his rifle down at the climbers. His shots were precise, aimed at limbs and climbing claws, not killing, but making them lose their grip and fall back into the squirming mass below. Choi Hyun-woo loaded another canister. He fired twice more. 2 more tendons, anchoring the node to the floor, flash froze and snapped. The node was now hanging by a single straining cord. It swung wildly, slamming into the cavern wall with a sound like a giant heart being punched. The light inside it was throbbing. Erratic. The hive mind was in full, screaming panic. The shared pain was overwhelming. The Cathar on the floor were no longer an organized defense. They were a convulsing mob, some attacking each other in their confusion, others simply curling into fetal positions. But the last 2 shadow song reached the ledge. They came together, a coordinated pair of ultimate killing machines. One went for Lee, the other for Choi. Park and Kim intercepted. The fight was not elegant. It was brutal, desperate, and clinical. Park fought with controlled fury, her knives shattering limbs, puncturing sound-producing organs, destroying the elegant symmetry of the demonic form. She turned a creature of shadow and death into a broken, leaking thing that could only spit and claw from the ground. Kim's fight was quieter, more terrible. She used her syringe gun at point-blank range, injecting a cocktail of neurotoxins that caused violent, uncontrollable muscle spasms. The shadow song seized, its own magnificent body turning against it, bones snapping from the force of its contractions. Through it all, Choi Hyun-woo worked. He set the final charge. Not a canister. This was a shaped plasma charge, designed to cut and cauterize. He clamped it directly onto the last, groaning tendon that held the gigantic node. Lee Tae-soo stood over the paralyzed, shuddering form of the lead shadow song. It looked up at him, its eyes still burning with hate, but also now with a dawning, galaxy-deep horror. It had seen its kind unmade, not just killed, but dismantled, humiliated, broken. It had felt the hive mind's agony. Lee's helmet speaker clicked on. broadcasting on a wide frequency, one the node would pick up. He spoke to the creature and to the dying mind in the center of the room. "You think you are demons," Lee said, his voice flat, without anger, without pride. "It was just a statement of fact. You use terror as a weapon, but terror is just a tool. You have forgotten what true fear is. It is not the fear of death. It is the fear of being known, of being taken apart, piece by piece, and understood. It is the fear that your enemy feels no rage, only purpose." He nodded to Choi. Choi Hyun-woo pressed the trigger. The charge flared, a blade of pure white sun. It sliced through the final tendon with a clean, silent severance. The great biosynaptic node, the mind of the swarm, fell. It did not crash. It dropped, a dead weight, and slammed onto the cavern floor with a final, wet, world-ending thud. The liquid light within it guttered and went out. The psychic scream that tore through the hive link was not a sound, but a silent wave of absolute, final despair. And then nothing. A great, yawning silence. On the ledge, the humans stood surrounded by the broken forms of the galaxy's most feared warriors. Below, the node was a dark, inert mound. The thousands of Cathar in the chamber, and as the signal died, across the entire planet, were suddenly still. Then, like puppets with cut strings, they collapsed. Not dead, but empty, directionless. The will that drove them was gone. In the quiet, Lee Tae-soo keyed his comms. "Wrath to Vanguard. Primary target destroyed. The demon's heart has stopped. Mission accomplished." The silence on Helios Prime was heavy. It was not the quiet of peace, but the quiet after a great and terrible noise. The constant shrieks, the thunder of guns, the hum of energy shields, all gone. Now there was only the moan of the wind through shattered rock and the distant, confused chittering of the Cathar. The demons were not dead, but they were broken. They moved in slow, aimless circles. They bumped into each other. They ignored the coalition forces entirely. The great, coordinated swarm had become a mindless herd. The heart that drove them had been ripped out. In the ruins of Fortress Aegis, Commander Calyx watched the human dropship land in the main courtyard. It was a plain, functional craft, still streaked with soot and alien biofluids. The ramp came down. Captain Lee Tae-soo walked down first. His black armor was scarred, dented, and stained with dark, sticky substances. The others followed. Park Ji-hyun, Choi Hyun-woo, Kim Min-ji. They moved with a tired but watchful efficiency. They did not look like triumphant heroes. They looked like workers returning from a hard, grim job. Calyx approached, his Vryn body held in a posture of deep, formal gratitude. High-perched Sithara landed beside him, one wing still bandaged by Kim Min-ji's handiwork. "Captain Lee," Calyx clicked, his voice thick with emotion. "You have saved our species. The debt of the Vryn, of the Sylphus, of all the coalition here. It is eternal. We owe you our lives." Lee Tae-soo gave a short, slight bow of his head. "The threat is neutralized. Your people are safe." His words were correct, but they were cold. There was no warmth in the victory. Sithara trilled softly. "Your methods? We have never seen such warfare. You did not just defeat them. You unmade them." Before Lee could answer, Dr. Kwon Soo-bin came hurrying down the ramp. Her face was pale, her eyes wide behind her glasses. She had come down from the Vanguard in a separate shuttle. She carried a datapad that trembled in her hands. "Captain," she said, her voice urgent, ignoring the aliens. "The bio readings from the hive chamber. The synaptic collapse. What you did, it wasn't a military strike. It was a neurological massacre. You didn't just kill the node. You flooded the hive mind with its own death trauma. It's It's barbaric. Lee turned his calm, empty gaze on her. It is effective. At what cost? Quan insisted, her scientific horror overcoming her fear. The Geneva Protocols, the Sentient Warfare Accords. The Cathar are not signatories, Sergeant Park G. Hyen said flatly, checking the charge on her sidearm. They do not have a concept of war crimes. They have only a concept of food and not food. We have redefined the category. Calyx and Sathara listened, their postures shifting from gratitude to unease. The humans were arguing about laws the demons ignored. It was a chilling insight into their mindset. Choi Hyun-woo spoke up, his voice tired but clear. Doctor, did the Coalition's rules stop the Cathar? Did their honor save this fortress? He gestured to the smoldering ruins around them. No, we did. We fought the war they were fighting, not the one they wished they were fighting. Kim Min-ji, the medic, stepped forward. She looked at Stara's bandaged wing, then at Quan. There is a wound, she said softly. You can treat it gently, and it might heal, or it might get infected and kill the patient. Or you can cut out the infected part. It is more painful. It leaves a bigger scar, but the patient lives. We are the surgeons. The galaxy has an infection. The metaphor hung in the air. The Coalition looked at their own ruined home. They're dead, they're near extinction. They had chosen the gentle treatment. They had been dying from it. A week later, a formal inquiry was held by the Galactic Coalition Senate on the neutral station Elysium. The chamber was a vast, circular room with representatives of 100 species. The humans were there, a small, plain delegation. Captain Lee stood before them, out of armor now, in a simple uniform. The Silphus ambassador sang a beautiful song of praise for human bravery. The Vryn ambassador clicked a long, formal list of territories they would grant to humanity as a reward. When it was Lee's turn to speak, he declined the offers of territory. We require only the resources expended on the operation to be replenished, he said, and a permanent seat on the Military Oversight Council. The request caused a stir. The council was for strategic planning, not for a single mid-tier species. The Glev, an ancient species of pacifist philosophers, spoke. Your methods, Captain. The brutality. The psychological weapons. The systemic poisoning. This is not warfare as the civilized galaxy understands it. It is atrocity. We must ask, what is to stop you from turning such weapons on others? Lee Tae-soo looked at the Glev representative. There was no anger in his eyes. Only patience, like a teacher with a slow student. You misunderstand, Lee said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet chamber. We have no desire to rule you. We have no interest in your territories or your politics. Our only interest is our own survival, and the survival of those we choose to protect. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Cathar strategy was simple. It relied on the victim's choice. Die quickly or die slowly. They offered no third option. We have introduced the third option. He leaned forward slightly. The predator can become prey. We do not fight to win battles. We fight to end wars. We fight so that our enemies, and any who watch, understand one thing. To start a war with humanity is not a risk of defeat. It is a guarantee of annihilation. Not of your army, but of your will to ever field an army again. The silence in the chamber was absolute. The truth of it settled over them. The humans were not a bigger bully. They were something entirely new. They were a deterrent made flesh. They were the void that stared back. You saved us, the Silphus ambassador whispered, the music gone from her voice, replaced by awe and fear. Yes, Lee said. Remember that we did, and remember how we did it. That memory is now your shield, as much as it is our weapon. The humans were granted their seat on the council, not out of gratitude, but out of a profound, galaxy-shaking caution. Months later, on the edge of explored space, a Cathar scout ship encountered a small human survey vessel. The scout ship, part of a new swarm, detected the weak, primitive signature. Its instincts flared. Prey. It moved to intercept, to harvest, to begin the old, familiar cycle. The human vessel did not run. It did not raise shields. It simply broadcast a single, tight-beam data packet on all Cathar hive frequencies. It contained no words. It was just a raw sensory recording. The final moments of the biosynaptic node on Helios Prime, the flash freeze of the tendons, the shattering, the fall, the silent, psychic scream of a dying mind, and the cold, empty eyes of the human soldiers standing amidst the broken shadow song. The Cathar scout ship stopped. It hung in space for a long, long time. Then, without a sound, it turned and powered its drives to maximum, fleeing back into the dark from whence it came. The story spread, from whispered reports to official briefings. It was translated into 1,000 languages, but the core of it never changed. When the demons came, the brave allies held the line with honor and courage. But it was the humans who broke them, not by being stronger, but by being something the galaxy had never before seen, a species that could look into the heart of a nightmare, dissect it, and make the nightmare afraid. And so the title was born. First in a Silthus after-action report, then echoing through the stars. Humans called them Special Forces, for their brutality made even demons quake. It was not a name they gave themselves. It was a warning the galaxy gave to itself. A reminder of the terrible, quiet surgeons who lived among them, and what happened when they were forced to operate.